Welcome to Free Speech TV. I'm Carl Nagin. With me today is Kandi Mossett, who has emerged as one of the leading voices on the impact of climate change and environmental injustice, particularly on indigenous people, but on all of us. And she's going to talk to us today about her work with the Indigenous Environmental Network. Her work has included testifying before Congress, speaking at the UN, numerous forums. She has an MA in environmental management. Welcome to Free Speech TV.
Thank you.
Kandi. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah.
So, talk to us a little bit about the Indigenous Environmental Network and your work with them and what your mission is.
Oh wow, how much time do we have?
All the time you want. Rock on.
I've been with IEN for a decade now, and I can't believe it because I feel like I hit the ground running then, and I'm still running. There's no shortage of the work that we have to do in our communities. But IEN as an organization, I guess, has been formed since 1990. And it was kind of born out of the American Indian movement when it was kind of getting militant, it was kind of breaking apart. We still wanted to create that platform for people, indigenous peoples in our communities, to have a voice, about what was happening in our communities when it came to extractive industries. And so our network is literally just thousands of people strong that are fighting back against environmental injustices in our communities, like mine in North Dakota. That's how I got involved with the Indigenous Environmental Network. They actually came to my community and were helping when we were fighting against a proposed oil refinery that was going to refine tar sands oil. And we have successfully fought this in North Dakota on the Fort Berthold Reservation, which is where I grew up, Mandan, Hiradza, Rickará Nations. We've been fighting it successfully since, I'd say, around 2000, and it's still not built. And so when I saw IEN and what they were doing, I thought, that's what I want to do.
Wonderful. Because
my undergraduate degree is in natural resource and park management. And so I was working in Big Bend National Park in Texas, and I worked in some state parks in North Dakota, and I thought, wait a minute, so we set aside this little piece so that we can destroy the rest? It doesn't make any sense.
This is not just about indigenous people's rights, it's about all people's rights.
And not just people, all
Nature.
Living things. The right of everything to not only survive, but to thrive. And so that's kind of the work, in a nutshell, of what we try to fight for. And we keep our traditional lifeways in mind, our culture and our traditions that ground us in the roots of where we come from.
So these impacts of climate change affect Native people's identity, their culture, their spiritual life as well.
Yeah, completely. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's something called blood memory, where we physically feel that pain within our bodies when we see something digging into the earth and scraping it out of the ground and extracting. Coal, for example, has been compared to the liver of our Mother Earth, because coal is the natural filter for water. You ever have a water filter? That carbon piece in there, it's a coal, and we're taking that out, and we're combusting it to oblivion. And so there's this whole concept around the pain that we feel when our mother is being attacked like this. And so when we have a lot of our stories from wherever we're from, so I'm from the North Dakota area along the Missouri River, we tell our stories for what we see in the land, in the landscape. We sing our songs based upon the way the hills roll, the ups and downs. It's a connection that a lot of people have a hard time realizing is there until they hear it.
Or see it.
So that's what we try to share, is that connection for a lot of people is lost.
Storytelling is a big part of this, then?
It's huge. Oral traditions and storytelling. We didn't write stuff down, but the danger in that was that nowadays the history books, they have his story and not our story. And one of our big things is that we speak for ourselves. We don't need somebody else telling our story for us. We speak for ourselves from our own place of identity.
Wonderful. Now, you've been involved also in resistance to fracking. Can you talk about that work?
Yeah.
And your direct experience of it.
So, fracking, first of all, is all over the world. I think there's 32 or 34 states in the U.S. alone that are involved in the fracking fight, and in North Dakota it's called the Bakken shale oil. And since 2005 really was when it really took off, because the 2005 Energy Policy Act was changed by Dick Cheney, who was the former vice president. He was also the CEO of Halliburton, who had stakes in the Bakken shale. And that is when the oil and gas industry was exempted from the Clean Drinking Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act by saying that they didn't have to give their proprietary information. So the chemicals that they were going to use didn't have to be disclosed because it was proprietary information, they said. That's when fracking took off in the country, because they knew the chemicals they would have to use were very toxic and volatile and dangerous and deadly. And so when cattle drop over dead, a horse drops over dead, or a human gets really, really sick, when we have cancers and stuff and we can take their blood and see the chemicals that are in there, we now, because of that change in 2005, can't prove that that company that was fracking right next to our well is responsible for doing that to us.
They're liable for it.
That's right.
Have you brought cases, and are you bringing cases?
There's cases that are being drug out in the courts that have been for the past decade, because it's been going on. And in North Dakota, it's not about the natural gas. That's a byproduct of the fracking industry, because they want to get to the oil. Mm-hmm. They don't want to spend any more money on pipeline infrastructure, and natural gas isn't, I guess, expensive enough for them to spend money on pipelines, so they're just flaring all of this natural gas into the air that could be used to heat homes if they're going to frack.
It affects your air, it affects
everything.
Your water, it affects your land. How
Yeah.
does it affect, how do you immediately know and feel the impacts of this?
Well, a lot of it, you know, the environmental impacts are there. But those are like death by 1,000 cuts, because it's slow. You're drinking the poisoned water, you're breathing the poisoned air. Oh, geez, my sinuses are really acting up. Geez, I've had this cold for 6 weeks. It's not going away. Little babies having RSV, upper respiratory symptoms, that are being born in North Dakota. Cancers, you know. People
Cancer
aren't,
clusters.
they're not like relating it to that, but it's the social impacts that have been devastating. Because when an oil boom occurs, or any energy industry comes to your place, money comes with it. So what followed it was all these people wanting that money, and they brought with them drugs, they brought with them violence against our women, where women were starting to be attacked, raped, left for dead, put into sex trafficking. And it's not just women. I mean, some of these kids are 11, 12, 13 years old. You had heroin abuse. We've never had to deal with heroin in our communities. Organized crime, MS-13, which is highly organized crime that started in Venezuela, in my little teeny town in North Dakota, following the money. Yeah. Not enough police to do anything about it, not enough people to protect us. We've had to learn how to protect ourselves. And it's totally changed everything. It's not like, hey, I can leave my door open anymore, or you can't trust anybody. We've had kids almost get abducted walking home from the elementary school, like 4 blocks in a little town to their house. So it's not even safe to walk home from school anymore. And it all is a part of it. And people don't think of that social impact as much. Mm-hmm. But it's right there in our faces every day, and it's changed for the worse. And so right now what we're trying to do is bring back our culture and use our languages and bring back what we've survived on for this long already. It's why we're still here, is because we have that connection, and we're regrounding ourselves in that connection so that we're not lost.
Kandi, you've also been working with tribal campus efforts.
Yeah.
Can you describe that work?
So I initially started working with this group called the Energy Action Coalition, which is now the Power Shift Network. It's an amazing group of young people across the country that are fighting for change, to shift the power. And I went to 33 tribal colleges. I got in my little car and just drove around the country to tribal colleges, which are, by the way, are in like really remote locations and like little small buildings and stuff. it was awesome to meet so many people throughout Indian country that were like, I could say, you're not alone in the struggle, you know, the struggle is real, but I'm here with you. And so they formed like green groups on campus where we tried to get the presidents of each college to sign on to this petition to say that they were going to swap their light bulbs to LED and save this much money by doing so. You know, it was like a campaign to get recycling in schools and use wind turbines on facilities and campuses, and it was like so wildly successful. And then I started getting older and older, and I was like, I can't do youth work anymore. And I started transitioning into the United Nations forums and into the more of the international work. And but that was when I was able to testify in front of Congress and tell people, look, we have this much potential in Indian country for solar and wind and small scale distributed projects, not large scale. Why are you extracting us to oblivion? And so that is the message we've continued through. It's a little bit more difficult in this administration, as you might imagine. Number 45 is shocked. Like deaf and blind and everything else. But, you know, 4 years is nothing earth time, you know. It's like this, and he'll be out of here, and we'll be like, we learned from that mistake. Let's never do that again. That's what I think. You know, we're going to be like, holy, we had to hit rock bottom before we could crawl back up. So that's
it's galvanized your communities.
I think so.
Wonderful. And at the UN, what was your presentation there? Well,
the UN, so the first United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, the first conference that I went to, which they have every year, to discuss, all the countries get together to discuss how we're going to tackle climate change, was in 2009 in Copenhagen. So I went there and I thought, oh, this is really weird. Like, they had civil society over here and NGOs over here and lingos and bingos and youngos and like, I'm like, what? I don't get this. And then it was like a bunch of the really important spaces was like older white men in business suits. And I'm like, but how come I can't get in there? They're like, because you need a secondary badge. And it was just like really interesting. I was like, why are we even here? And then I started to learn the concept of, if you're, and this is something a good friend of mine used to say, who's recently passed on. In fact, the last time I saw him was here, Bob Goff. He used to say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I was like, all right, I'm going to be at the table and interject our voice, you know. So I've been learning the UN processes and how we can hopefully bring that international scale to our grassroots communities, because we do have the United Nations declarations on the right of indigenous peoples, which took like 20 years to, you know, to even pass. And now we're in this, it's been 10 years since it was, you know, passed. I say that because we're still having a hard time implementing it in our communities. And so that's where I'm navigating right now in those UN spaces. I'm going to be going to Bonn, Germany here in November, and I'm going to be speaking out and saying, this is what's happening now in our communities. And ever since Rio Plus 20 in like 1990, or Rio, the first one, we've gone backwards.
Yes.
Exponentially. What are you doing? You can sign on to these things all you want, but unless it's implemented, you know, if they spent as much effort as they do on wordsmithing a paragraph, of doing on the ground gardening or something, we'd be so much better off. And that's what I say in these forums. Like, I try to bring some life into those things, because it's really sterile. And it's like, no, this isn't real life.
It's abstract. It's a forest of acronyms. It's
oh my
people
gosh. I'm like, I don't know what that means. So that's my role personally. And then with the Indigenous Environmental Network, I want to be able to let people know that these forums exist and that they're making choices on our behalf, whether we know it or not. And so I try to like bring back what I learned to the communities and say, what would you say? Who wants to go? Who can go with me? To make sure that we speak for ourselves, not some appointed United States person.
What is the message of Standing Rock and Oak Flats and all of these confrontations with these very, very well-funded extractive industries, fossil fuel industries, with teams of lawyers and politicians who've been bought off, and the corruption that goes with that? Well,
the message is shame on you, you sellouts. Say what they are, they're sellouts. You know, it's like that we've given way too much power to money. And at the end of the day, that little piece of paper doesn't have any power. You can't eat it, you can't drink it. You might be able to burn it, but money burns fast. And you're not going to stay very warm for very long. And so it's a matter of keep it in the ground. We don't have to extract these things. And it doesn't have to come back to money. You know, we have the resources, and you know, the most important resources. They look at coal, uranium mining, you know, mountaintop removal, all these things that these companies think of as resources that are important. It's not true. There are three most important natural resources that in the world that we need to protect, and that is our air to breathe, our water to drink, and our soil to grow our food. That's the triple threat right there that is under attack because of these industries. And it's like, I don't care if you're exploring Mars or trying to find another planet to live on. This is my home. And you better quit disrespecting my mother, because we're going to come after you and do everything we can to fight on the front line of the battlefields to win against this extractive industry. We're not going away. In fact, we're growing. The movement is growing. People are waking up, finally. Like, we've been fighting for over 500 years in this country, and it's so nice to have people say, I got your back. I hear what you're saying now. Because it wasn't like that even 10 years ago. It was not the force that we're seeing now. So Standing Rock, Oak Flats, all that is empowering people to speak up and to say, no one's going to do it for us. We have to do it.
Are you finding, too, that as indigenous people, you have lessons that those of us in the environmental movement need to learn?
Such as? I think it's that whole thing just about, you know, learning about what does it really mean? What does colonization really mean? What is capitalism? What is it really? And how can I interact as an individual? I think people need to understand that we all have to go through a process of decolonization. As individuals, I have to go through it every day because I've been so, you know, trained almost or brainwashed by this is the way it is. A lot of us have. Like, this is the way business as usual. But we can use something called neuro-decolonization through mindfulness. We got a good friend, Dr. Michael Yellowbird. He's from home, from where I'm from, and he talks about it. And it's amazing. And you have to just Google it or something, because the individual person has to heal from within, and that will come out instead of, what am I going to do for the rest of the world? How am I going to save the world? People have to realize that inner healing first. And it doesn't matter who you are, everyone has to be decolonized and has to go through that. And it's kind of hard, and it's different for every individual. It's a constant struggle, but for me, I feel like that is the way forward as humanity. It's not, you know, renewable energy, putting up a wind turbine, putting up a solar panel, those are good. We need to transition. That's not what's going to save us. We have to realize that the foundation that we built as humanity that got us to where we are now with global climate change and all these problems is built on capitalism and is built on colonization. And it's going to take a long time to uncolonize ourselves to get back to the reality of life, which is we don't need the hustle. We honestly don't need that 9-to-5 job because they're making us, whoever they are, believe that we need to hustle for that money. What you need to be able to do is go out and know where you can drink clean water from if you turned your tap on and the water didn't come out. Or if you went to a grocery store and there was nothing on the shelves. You need to be able to walk out your door and pick something from your garden that's going to feed you. That's the reality of life that we've gotten so far away from.
Kandi Mossett, thank you for speaking with us. Is there anything else you want to tell us about your work?
I just want to say thank you to Free Speech TV for letting me say these things and say what I want to say, because I can talk to myself until I'm blue in the face. It doesn't matter if nobody hears it, that the struggle is real and nobody's alone in the struggle. And
we're all connected in it. Thank you.
Heck yeah. Doesn't matter who you are, what you look like. We are collectively humanity.
Thank you. We're all connected. Thanks a lot. Thank you for connecting with us.